everyone. Welcome back to the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube for the latest episode of Broncos Now. As always, I'm your host, Sydney Jones, and coming up on today's episode, the Broncos held their final practice of the week today. We'll hear from some younger players who made Denver's initial roster and take a look at some of the team's transactions today. All that and more coming up. Broncos held their final practice of the week here at Centura Health Training Center before the long weekend and the start of the regular season. And following practice today, we talked to a few of the younger players who made Denver's initial 53-man roster. Wide receiver Brandon Johnson and defensive lineman Elijah Garcia both talked about making the team in their time here in Denver last season.
The work is just now starting. It's hard enough to make the team, but it's harder to stay. So stay on it. Stay on your P's and Q's and be on your stuff.
Every day I come out here, man, I just try to be the best player I can be. And for all those games, I really just wanted to enjoy the experience of putting an NFL jersey on, going out there and just playing hard in front of my friends and family. So, yeah, of course, that's my main goal, to make this squad and help this team. But I didn't want to look too far ahead because I still had those challenges ahead of me.
As we mentioned earlier this week, 4 undrafted rookies made this year's initial roster. Running back Jaleel McLaughlin, tackle Alex Palczewski, tight end Nate Atkins, and outside linebacker Thomas Incoom. The team placed Palczewski on injured reserve earlier today, but we did hear from the 3 other guys following practice. Jaleel McLaughlin talked about making this team and how his work ethic contributed to that.
It was definitely surreal. Definitely a surreal moment knowing that I made the team. My mom was my first call. She was excited. It's just a blessing. It was definitely a great day. I wanted to give it everything I had, no matter the outcome, no matter what happened, made the team, not make the team, play good, not play good. I wanted to be able to say that I gave it everything that I had. So that was just my mindset from day one. I want to come in and I want to work as hard as I can, and I want to let everything else play itself out. And that's where the work came from. But I've been working like that since my senior year in high school. So.
Tight end Nate Atkins discussed his top 30 visit here in Denver, talking with head coach Sean Payton and what he can learn from the other tight ends in his room.
Coach Payton was, whenever I came on my visit, he, said he had a clear role for me and, liked my film and everything from South Carolina. So, him, and then I met with Declan, Coach Doyle, and he said, he liked my film as well, and, he could see me making this team somehow, some way. So, Trout, Greg, Chris, and then Lucas coming in is, it's everything. Everybody kind of has their role. Chris with blocking, and then the other 2 kind of do everything. So we got good vets in the room, and we got young guys. I'm just trying to do my best to learn from everybody in that room, learn from all the coaches, and just do everything I can to help the team win.
An outside linebacker, Thomas Incoom, said he knew about Denver's history of undrafted rookies making the team and discussed what it meant to him to be one of them and what he can learn from outside linebacker Randy Gregory and Frank Clark.
Just taking it day by day, coming in, just head down, just working, getting my football mindset, IQ and everything, just learning and always come in, approach it like a job. You come in, you have a job to do your job, and just do it the best of your ability, and everything's going to take care of itself. Great mentors, man. Great mentors. Going in the fan, they tell you, hey, you need to fix your hand placement, you need to do this and that. Come out here and fix it, and you go see the improvement just right in there from what they just told you in the meeting.
And the Broncos announced several transactions today. The team signed tackle Quinn Bailey, cornerback Fabian Moreau, and defensive lineman Mike Purcell to the active roster, while also placing tackle Alex Palczewski, safety PJ Locke, and cornerback K1 Williams on injured reserve. Now joining me here inside the Broncos podcast studio is Broncos lead writer Eric Dellala. Eric, today was the final practice of the week here for the Broncos. Crazy to think next time they're back out on the practice field, it's going to be game week.
That's right. Yeah, I said
crazy. It's already here.
Yeah, when they're back out there, they'll be getting ready for the Raiders.
Yep, I know. Well, Eric, the team announced some transactions earlier today. We saw they placed a few guys on IR: PJ Locke, Alex Palczewski, and cornerback K1 Williams. Unfortunate for some of those guys to start the season there.
Yeah, I guess you look at it from a standpoint of K1. There's been some reports that he might end up missing the whole year, and so the fact that they decided to put him on this type of IR, carry him onto the roster for a day and then put him on IR suggests there's at least a chance he can come back at some point. Sean Payton was asked about it. It doesn't sound like any of these injuries are season-ending. We've seen PJ Locke out there kind of running around a little bit, so maybe he's a guy who comes back sooner rather than later. We'll have to see. But, yeah, it's all kind of procedural this time of year, right? Guys that have been dealing with injuries, you want to get them to the roster for a day so that you can have the option to bring them back later. K1, obviously, the starter among those three, a big piece of this defense, one that I think is kind of underrated, and we saw the strong
Definitely.
start to camp that he had. So hopefully the Broncos get him back at some point. We haven't gotten a real indication officially how long he might be out. We'll have to wait and see.
I know we've already talked earlier this week about Jerry Jeudy, not being placed on IR, but it was good to see Riley Moss didn't make that list either.
Yeah, good point. Young guy who obviously the Broncos have high hopes for, had that kind of core muscle injury. He's another guy who's been out there kind of running around a little bit on the side field. We'll see when he eases his way back into practice. We're getting close to that month-long timeline that Sean Payton mentioned when he underwent that procedure in terms of how long he was going to be out. I think Sean Payton said a month for the recovery and then, another couple of weeks to get back into things. But with Riley Moss, you're thinking, okay, well, he's a guy who hasn't really done much during training camp, so how do we get him ready to play football games, I would imagine. And if he goes on IR, he can't practice until you open that 2-week window to designate him to return. And so, maybe you get him a few more weeks to get healthy, but he doesn't get the benefit of practice. So at least this way, I'm sure you still want to get him out there sooner rather than later. But when he's ready to practice, he can and doesn't have to wait kind of those additional weeks. And, maybe you keep him inactive for a couple of weeks. We'll have to see. Again, this time of year, who knows exactly what's going to happen. But to have that option, it does suggest that he's closer than maybe we thought to returning to the field.
Well, Eric, it seems like the practice squad is, pretty much set now with the team announcing that as well today. They added a few guys, wide receiver Philip Dorsett, wide receiver David Sills, and tight end Lucas Kroll. What do you know about any of those guys?
Yeah, I mean, Dorsett, obviously a former first-round pick, speedy guy. We'll have to see what the Broncos do when they get to game day. Or what roster moves they make ahead of game day. But obviously you got 4 wide receivers on the active roster right now. And then you've got Jerry Jeudy who's dealing with that injury. So who knows if he'll be available for week 1. But you do have now a slew of guys on the practice squad, and the 2 guys you just mentioned, Lil Jordan Humphrey and Michael Bandy. And so you can elevate 1 or 2 of those guys if you want to the game day roster for week 1, have them available to play. I think it'll be about who fits the game plan that week. Is it a guy like Dorsett who's got that speed? Is it a Sills, a younger guy who had a little bit of success in New York? And then the tight end, Sid, coming over from New Orleans, he's a guy that had a really big preseason in terms of catching the football. I think 10 catches during the preseason, over 100 yards in his final preseason outing. So another young player, undrafted in 2022. Wasn't there with Sean, still came over from the Saints, but it wasn't there with Sean Payton, but clearly they saw something on tape they liked, bring him in to develop behind some of these guys, like a Greg Dulcich in your tight end room. But interested to see what all 3 of those guys can do. And I think what they do said is they give you options here as you near the regular season.
Right. You mentioned undrafted. We heard earlier in the show from several of the undrafted college free agents who made the team this year. 2 guys I really want to highlight are tight end Nate Adkins and outside linebacker Thomas Incoom. We haven't really talked about them a lot, Eric. So what has really just impressed you about them?
Yeah, I'll take a little credit to it. I mentioned Nate Adkins early on as a guy that
you did.
I saw. Everybody else was talking about some other potential undrafted guys, and love the way that Nate Adkins blocks first and foremost. And he can do it as a tight end. He can do it as a fullback. He can do it on special teams or running down the field to make tackles on special teams. He's kind of just that guy that's willing to get in there, get his hands dirty, the same way that Chris Manhertz kind of is as a tight end.
They said he was a tackle back in high school, right?
High school, a tackle, small tackle. I think he said he was 215 pounds. But yeah, a physical guy, can obviously catch the football a little bit too. I think had a couple of receptions for at least 10 yards in the preseason. But he's a guy that I think – it might not be the prettiest always, but as Sean Payton said the other day, you tell him to go block the Mike linebacker, one way or another, he's going to get up there and block the Mike linebacker, and he's not going to make assignment mistakes, and he's going to do his job. That's what you expect from these young guys, and he's a versatile guy, can play a lot of different positions, obviously got attention from the Broncos. His only top 30 visit was here in Denver. And they were able to use some of those on guys like a Nate Adkins because only had 5 picks, didn't have one in the top, 60 picks or whatever. And so you could use some of those on some guys who might be down the board. But yeah, really excited about Nate Adkins. And then you mentioned Incoom, a guy who has obviously flashed some potential there in the preseason, made a couple of plays. He was nervous, I think, about making the 53. He said he didn't eat breakfast until he heard. And he's a guy that obviously has you want to see him develop here. But I think the fact that you saw him make the 53, there's that potential. And maybe it's all about, hey, is this guy going to get through waivers or not? Broncos may have been worried about that. And again, special teams, if he wants a jersey on game day, that's going to be the route, because in some ways he kind of replaces an Aaron Patrick who was there last year, a big special teams contributor. If Incoom wants to get that jersey, be up on game day, he's got to find a way to be one of those core special teams guys.
Well, as the players take this long weekend to relax and have some free time before the start of the regular season, Eric, how do you really feel like where this team is at right now as game week is next week?
Yeah, it's exciting, I think, in part because we don't really know exactly what things are going to look like. I feel positive about the way things are going. I mean, I think it's been a good training camp. They've worked extremely hard. They've pushed themselves to get better. I think the thing that I've seen so much during training camp in the offseason is just the focus on situational football. And the mastery that Sean Payton has of that. And so often in the NFL, it's about not losing games as much as it is winning games and being prepared to handle certain situations and kind of being the smart football team. And I think with Sean Payton, you're going to see a much smarter football team. You're going to see a team prepared for these moments that come up. And listen, you play so many one-possession games. If you have even a little bit of an edge, that's going to help you. So that stands out. And then I just think, hey, now's a chance to see for real what the Sean Payton effect is on offense, where he can find little advantages in the game plan, find ways to put guys in position to succeed. And we'll see what this defense looks like under Vance Joseph, an improved special teams unit, hopefully. I mean, I'm excited, and it is fun that the first opportunity is against the Las Vegas Raiders, who the Broncos have not beaten here in a few years, and I'm sure they want nothing more than to knock off a division rival to start the year.
Yep, it's going to be a fun home opener. Looking forward to it, Eric. Appreciate coming on the show today.
Yeah, see you next week for game week.
Well, that'll do it for today's episode of Broncos Now, Broncos Country. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll be off tomorrow, so I'll meet you right back here in the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube on Monday. See you all then.